ready?
Sports Radio 610 presents Payne and Pendergast.
All right, there it is. The DX theme music, like an anthem for Payne and Pendergast when this man joins us. Final time here before we get to training camp in a few weeks as the Texans wrap up mandatory minicamp yesterday. And it's been a busy offseason, and looking forward to time. We've had some news over the last few days with the signing of Nick Chubb, so we got a lot of stuff to get into here with our good friend, Texans Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio. Nick, it's great to have you on as always. Derek Stingley Jr., 9 responses, 6.3 seconds. Your thoughts on the Stingalytics of his press conference yesterday?
Morning, fellas. Good to be here. Probably means he won't be on Jericho's list after that response. But actually, I was just talking to Omar about this. Chubb's response was probably even better when I asked him about, when did you what's your sense of what's going on? And he said, yeah, I showed up. Coming music to our ears, so it was great to hear.
I
so
knew
between
you would.
Sting, Chubb, Daniil was a little bit more vociferous. He had a few more things to say, but he has a little more experience, so he's been around a little bit. So we'll give him some slack on that.
Nick, all these people from Cleveland were, people I talk to, and then you read it everywhere, and Cleveland fans will say the guy's got no ego, Nick Chubb. That man, he's just all about business, just wants to work and everything. And then I was kind of caught off guard yesterday when he responded to a question, and he said he was trying to figure out why the Texans wanted him. And even despite his injury history and everything, I was kind of taken aback at hearing that from a guy who's been a star running back in the NFL for a long time.
Yeah, Nick's been a good player in this league for a number of years. I mean, it's interesting. Go back in the Wayback Machine. So I forget what year, whatever year he came out. So he and Sony Michel were in the same backfield, Georgia. And Sony wasn't the most talkative either, so I'm not sure who got the word in edgewise at Georgia. But they were two good players. We ended up drafting Sony at 32. Cleveland took Nick really with that next pick in the second round, or 33 or 34, whatever it was. They were two good players. Sony had a pretty good career, had curtailed a little bit with some injuries. And Nick had the injuries coming out, and he has done a really good job. I mean, number of years, he's very productive. He's dealt with some things in 23 and 24. Happens to a lot of players, unfortunately. So, he was a player that D'Amico and I had discussions about, and we felt like there's similar, I would say similar, not the same, but along the lines of kind of what we did with speed. You look at that position, have a number of good players that had played a lot of football, been productive, whether it was Aziz, Christian, or Henry. And then adding EJ in this situation, similar. DP's done a good job for us. Joe had a productive season. And I think we always view it as if there's an opportunity out there that makes sense with the right player, and if we can fit it in financially, then it's worth exploring. And that's kind of how we arrive at the end point with Nick. But Nick's he's a workman-like player. He's very workman-like in his approach. He says less, does more. And I think that certainly resonates with our building and our program.
Nick, we actually played some audio from Joe Mixon from last season a little earlier in the show where he was asked by Chris Long about Nick Chubb coming back from his knee injury last year. And it's very clear the two have a close relationship. They came out the same time in high school. Is something like this where you're signing Nick Chubb, is that something do you talk to Joe through that process at all as you bring Nick Chubb in?
At different points. It's always case by case. We'll certainly talk to our players about different players that they may have experience with. I think sometimes on a personal level, a lot of players, and Seth can probably speak to this, you just cultivate relationships on a player-to-player basis, and you're certainly respectful of those relationships. So as you work through the process, if you feel like you need to have a conversation with somebody or get more information, then we'll do it. If not, and I think that case is probably a little bit more, there's a mutual respect for one another, and we try not to intervene too much or get involved in those.
Yeah. Nick Caserio joining us on Sports Radio 610. All right, Nick, so C.J. Stroud throws at minicamp this week. So were you able to take our DEFCON gauge here down from DEFCON? I actually did at one point about how concerned
Sean had to take my pulse. That's how nervous I was.
No, Nick, damn it. I actually did do a poll about how concerned people were when
Sorry, I missed it. I didn't see it, Sean. I'm sorry.
You didn't vote? You didn't get out and vote, Nick? Come on. So CJ's throwing, he looked great in minicamp. So I guess the question I'd have about CJ would be, look, you can tell he's put in some work in the weight room. This felt like a very different offseason for CJ compared to the one coming off his rookie year. Can you speak to that a little bit? Was there a different focus for CJ this time? How collaborative were you guys on that, and how CJ attacked this offseason as opposed to last offseason?
Sure. Every year is different. When you finish the season, whatever year that is, everybody takes a little bit of time, kind of recalibrate and kind of focuses on what do we need to do for the 2025 season. So I think we've talked about this on the show. We have a number of players that have the right mindset, that are about the work and are about improving and getting better as football players. And going back to February through March, even before the offseason program, we had a number of players that were here. Early on, February, March, it might be a combination of in the building, out of the building, but, they're getting work. I think CJ, when he does leave Houston, he goes out to California. I think he has some resources and some people that he utilizes, I think, out there at UCLA, so where he can actually get his work in. But he was here. He mentioned it the other day, the work that he did with Mike Eubanks and Clint, how they helped him in his overall development. So training's important, and as it pertains to, and D'Amico, when he was asked about this, I honestly think it was much ado about nothing. I think the spring, we were just trying to make good, smart decisions, just manage the players as we see fit, and then just in the end, the focus is on getting them ready for training camp. Building, he obviously trained and worked on his body and his overall strength development, which that's what the off-season program is usually for. We have a number of players who have made significant strides in those areas, kind of have the foundation in place relative to offensive system and some of the things that Nick has implemented. So now it's about training camp, and you'll have a better sense and feel for your team. Once you get into training camp, we feel like there's a decent amount of competition on the team, and we'll kind of let it sort itself out. But relative to CJ, he's put in the work. He's put himself in a good position. So I think all players is important, even though we kind of have this 40-day window here. There's still an element of work that you have to put in order to make sure that you're ready to go for the rigors of training camp.
Nick, CJ said yesterday that he's been watching some 2003 and 2004 film of Tom Brady, what he was like as a young quarterback. I want to play a little game with you. I want you to tell me whether you think this is C.J. Stroud or a previous Texans quarterback when asked about watching Tom Brady on film. I'm going to alter the quote a little bit to keep it anonymous.
So you're trying to confuse me, which isn't very hard to do.
You're going to tell me, is this CJ or is this a previous Texans quarterback? Quote, they refer to Tom Brady a lot. With all due respect to Coach, I told him, I'm going to be me. I'm not here to be a puppet, if you will. I'm going to be who I am and believe in what I bring to the table every day, unquote.
That sounds like something you would say to your defensive line coach.
Listen, I don't want to have to. That was a previous Texans quarterback. It was Brock Osweiler. You don't have to comment on Brock Osweiler. I feel like
he's doing a good job in college football.
He's not bad.
He really is.
Yeah, well, he doesn't want to hear about Tom Brady. Don't talk to him about Tom Brady. Yeah. He's his own man. I don't expect that CJ is approaching it that same way. And I do. I'm intrigued by the fact that, and I was really happy to hear that he's watching 2003, 2004 Tom Brady, because that was when, as you've told us before, man, Tom Brady was not like the classic chess master that we think of back in 2003 and 2004. What does CJ take from those early days of Tom Brady and, probably doing, operating perhaps in some of the same ways, or at least hoping to operate in some of the same ways?
Sure. There's a few things. There's likely a system element, let's say the foundation of the offense, even going back to 2003 and 2004. A lot of those concepts, whether it's protection systems, route distribution, route concept, formationing, those have carried through the years over the course of, call it 20 to 25 years, however long it's been. As it pertains to individual quarterback techniques and those types of things, you always have to be careful about trying to extrapolate, well, this player does this, you're going to try to do the same thing. I think any player, it's good to watch other players, and really what you're trying to do is maybe there's one or two things that you can focus on that you can apply to what you do or what you have as a player in order to productivity. So it's probably a combination of system element, what we call this, here's what happened on this play, here's what we were looking for, because there's a library of information that goes back a number of years. And then as it pertains to playing quarterback, that 2003 season, and I probably have mentioned this or talked about this, when you look at Tom's career, it was almost like two careers within one. You kind of had the 01 to kind of 10 group, and then 10 to 20 or whenever he left. And he didn't start. He wasn't a starter until 01, 2002. We weren't very good. We were 9-7, and then we turned the team over there a little bit. And then 03 and 04, we were fortunate enough to put ourselves in a position, have an opportunity to win some Super Bowls. And then Tom continued to, I would say, grow as a player. So, again, you have to, through the lens of what they're looking for, is it technique specific, as it pertains to the fundamentals, or is it system specific? And it's probably some combination of the two. And everybody is watching other players and picking and choosing, but you just have to figure out what can I utilize and apply that's going to help me in the current situation.
Nick Caserio joining us. Nick, just as a follow-up to that, a lot's been made. CJ was asked about it himself, and a lot's been made about CJ now having control of the offense, more control of the offense this year in Nick Caley's offense than maybe he had in previous years. How equipped do you feel like CJ is for that? How is he doing? How is he coming along with that? And I guess just in general, what exactly is that going to look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's always a process, so it's never anything happens overnight. So when you in the vernacular, that's step one. Step two is it's really about the communication mechanisms. So who helps drive the communication? Sometimes it's the center. He handles all the communication. There's other systems where the quarterback sets the protection system, makes the mic identification, and then the communication kind of goes top down, and then the line gets it distributed inside out. So it's some combination. The most important thing is, are you seeing it the same way? Is the offensive line seeing it the same way as a quarterback is seeing it, and vice versa? And then it's understanding where your issues or where your problems are, and then what's the solution. So, and it takes time. You have to immerse yourself in film. You have to immerse yourself in meetings. You have to go on the field and do it. And there's going to be probably a little bit of a trial and error that takes place. In the case of CJ, he was able to handle the run game. The mic identification is a part of that, so he was a part of all the group run installations. He was on the field in the run periods. So getting the blockers distributed right. Who's the mic? Where's the force? Do we have to motion a guy across to get him in proximity where he can block that area? So there's plenty of work that you can get done. In the passing game, that's probably the next step. There's going to be some things, all right, against this coverage, against this look, here's what we're going to do. But really, everything starts with the front, and it's understanding what's the protection system we're utilizing, who's the mic ID, and then everything kind of emanates off of that. So it's a process. I mean, everybody goes through. I mean, I'd say Tom went through it, and then got to a point where even though he had a lot of experience, each year it was, all right, let's go back and reintroduce it and establish a foundation. And then I would say as the more time you spend in tweaks as you go and add some adjustments to account for the problem. So the big thing for the quarterback is just understanding where issues are, and do we have a solution to that problem? And there's many ways that you can build that in.
Is there, when you go from quarterback to quarterback in the NFL, or you talk to younger quarterbacks, is there kind of a transition that guys make from college to the NFL, and then while they're in the NFL, and understanding that, yes, the quarterback is responsible for the run game as well as the pass? It's just it's not, you don't compartmentalize it and the quarterback's a passer. You can control the run game.
Yeah, Seth, that's probably the biggest adjustment that quarterbacks have to make. It can, depending on the system with which you go into or where you're drafted, because, again, you're really just trying to get the blockers distributed the right way. And let's say the defense has an extra player somewhere that you can't account for. What's your solution? And you have to be able to understand the dynamics of the play. And a lot of times the run is going to be married with some kind of run action or play action. So you kind of want to make them look the same. That's probably one of the biggest adjustments. It's a really good question that quarterbacks have to make, because the way offensive football is in college, there's a certain speed and pace with which they play. So it's really put the ball down and then you're going. So you're not necessarily worried about who's the mic, where are we going. You're just hoping to catch the defense a little bit off balance. And I'd say some defenses maybe in college are maybe a little bit more equipped to handle the pace and the speed. And do you have to offensively slow it down and say, okay, hold on, let's reset? The pace of play in college football is just so fast. I mean, really, when you watch teams play, it's how quickly can we get to the line, how fast can we get the play off. Sometimes that works in our league. Other times it's get to the line. All right, simulate you're going fast, and then, all right, what are they doing? And then what's our solution? So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game, and it probably goes on a little bit more in our level than it does in college. But I think the run game, you probably have better understand or need to have more of an understanding of the run game, because there's certain runs you just can't block the defense if it's mismatched. So you have to get out of the play or have a solution. That's probably where you have to spend the most time.
Well, Nick, I just had a flashback to from a defensive lineman's perspective. There was a time back when I was playing. There was a young quarterback that us defensive linemen were trying to tell him, listen, we know you're not handing the ball off here, or we know that this is going to be like your body language is telling us, and he refused to listen, and it was driving us insane because he could see it, and we're telling him, and so that's why I love hearing about CJ talking to the defensive players all the time and asking for their input, because I think some young quarterbacks really they don't understand how smart the defensive players can be and like how much they're picking up on you, because like you said. They've got all this time to watch. They've got all this time to figure things out on film, and some young guys just flat out don't get it.
You're 1,000% correct. And I think the good thing you want to see with your team is you want to work with the other side. Okay, what were you guys trying to do on that play? Okay, and again, nobody's trying to kind of get anybody. We're trying to help one another. We want to create competition. But I would say as an offensive player, the more you understand what's going on the defensive side of the ball, it's only going to help you. So whether it's a corner saying, hey, look, on this coverage, here's what we're showing. I'm using this technique. Here's the reason why. But when I do this, a little bit different. Or with the front. And I think our defense does a great job of showing one thing and presenting disguise and then playing something different. And you grow as a team that way. So as a player, if you want information and you're willing to absorb the information, everybody's here to help one another. So use the resources that you have. That was something. I mean, our players do it, which you want to see. CJ talk to Sting, or Petrie, or Bullock, or Lassiter, or Aziz, Coach Burke. I mean, I'd say we had a lot of that in New England as well. We had fortunate to have a number of smart players, but Tom would talk to Vrabel. Tom would talk to Brewski. And they would – I mean, again, there was healthy competition, but you're trying to help one another. Yeah. And then when you're getting ready to play an opponent, one of the things that we try to do with the look teams is make sure they understand we want this look to look this way. Here's the reason why, because it's going to help you as a player on Sunday. So – but I was just saying, I was fortunate to kind of learn both sides of the ball. The more you have an understanding of what's going on the other side of the ball, it's only going to help you in whatever your discipline is that you're working in.
The Texans executive vice president and GM Nick Caserio joining us, center position. And I know it's OTAs and mandatory minicamp, so these things are probably going to change as you guys actually put pads on and have guys block. But it looks like what has been the first unit has had Jake Andrews running at center when you've got a couple guys on the team who've been center for this team with Jared Patterson and Juice Scruggs. What is it about Andrews that has him running? It seems like running with the ones pretty definitively, or am I reading too much into that?
Yeah, I mean, you guys were here for a handful of days. I think they were open, and I think, honestly, we rolled a lot of guys through during the course of the spring. I mean, we had 8 practices. I'd say each practice is probably a little bit different. So we'll roll a lot of guys through there. I'd say we have a lot of players that have experience putting their hand on the ball. So, Jake has experience, I would say, in the system going back to New England, even though it was different. I mean, there's some elements that carry over. JP's done a good job for us, and Juice has played well with his opportunities. Juice kind of has a little bit of flexibility, kind of center guard. He started games at center for us. He started games at guard for us and provided a good level of play. There's probably a likelihood you're going to need 2 or 3 centers. I mean, you just look at our experience. My experience is at some point you're going to need somebody. Something's going to happen, and you're going to need multiple players that can play center. So, but overall, that group has done a pretty good job. They've worked. We have 15 or 16, however many offensive linemen we have on the roster, and other than Trent, everybody has been out there essentially working, which is good to see. So we think it'll be really good competition. Got competition inside. We have competition on the perimeter at tackle as well. Figure out, we know we're going to have 8 at the game each week because you get the extra linemen. So we got 8. Where's the depth? I mean, those are things that we'll kind of let the competition sort itself out. But Jake was a player coming out. We had decent grades on him when he was coming out of Troy. He has experience with Coach Popovich. I mean, Coach Cole was the offensive coordinator at Troy. that last year there when Jake, was a center. So, there's some, I would say, experience with one another. It doesn't necessarily guarantee or mean anything. And a lot of it's just kind of getting Jake up to speed here a little bit. So, but it's been a good group. And that group, the team collectively has put in a lot of good work throughout the course of the spring. I'm excited to see the competition sort itself out here in training camp.
When I look at some of the additions on the offensive line, the first thing that jumped out at me, if I think back on the whole offseason, is, okay, you got Cam Robinson, 6'6", 335 pounds or so. Ariante Ursary, 6'6", 335 pounds or so. Trent Brown, 6'21", and however much he weighs. Like, was there
12? Yeah, no, he's there's not a bigger human being in the league than Trent Brown. Maybe the defensive tackle down there in Tampa from Florida, but him and Trent could duke it out in a sumo wrestling match over there, maybe.
Yeah, he's like it's something you'd see at a circus. He's gigantic. What is he? Was there an emphasis on that, or is that just kind of the way it rolled out this year that you brought in a lot of size?
Probably a little happenstance there, Seth. I don't think it's, we're going to get a bunch of guys that are 6'12" into the building. So, but at some point, length is a component. I know there's a lot of discussion at length. Well, he's got short arms or he's not tall enough. Matt Light was 6'4.5" at 32-inch arms and played left tackle at a high level for 10, 11 years or whatever it was. So it's all what they do with their size. Like, do they play to their size? You might have undersized guys who, are good football players. You look at a guy like Shaq Mason. He's 6'1", and a half, and, Shaq played a lot of good football for a number of years. So in the end, it's about your technique. It's about your fundamentals. And I would say bigger players, taller players, you got to make sure that your weight's distributed properly, that you play with good body position, you play with good knee bend, because in the end, those are the things that are going to be relevant. And if you have a little bit of extra length, again, think about this. You're blocking Daniil Hunter, who's 6'5.5", that's got 35-inch arms, who can threaten the edge. So if you have a little bit of extra length that can hold them off for maybe a split second, maybe that makes a difference. But I would say, Rashawn Slater, he's not the tallest left tackle, but, the guy's like one of the best talents in the league. So, it's always case by case there a little bit. But to your question, it wasn't, we need to get longer and we need to get necessarily bigger. It's just kind of, I'd say, how it happened to work itself out more than anything.
It is, though, man. Whether it happens naturally or whatever, like when you go against an offensive line that has a bunch of long guys, like tall, long guys on it, it feels like you're going against a Jim Boeheim zone defense. Like, you're just like, these bastards. They're like the actual offensive line ends up being 4 foot longer than your normal offensive line. So I know I trust it is, if it's just happenstance, fine. I like dreaming of the possibility of just a bunch of gargantuan, Jonathan Ogden types out there.
It's a good conspiracy theory, no question. So we had like short tackles, tall tackles in New England. Nate Solder was 6'8", I think Sebastian Vollmer was like 6'7", and then we had Matt Light and is a bigger body. So look, if you have a little bit extra length, it might help. But in the end, it's just how well do you get the guy blocked on a line of scrimmage is the most important thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, sorry to you guys if I'm a little rattled. Nick said the words, imagine you're blocking Daniil Hunter, and I immediately soiled myself, and now I had to take a break. Seth knows I'm frightened by Daniil Hunter.
Sean goes all beta male whenever Daniil Hunter comes around.
I don't know what it is. He scares
feels
me.
Like he's like, he's the most mild-mannered dude on earth.
But look at it. He said yesterday, Nick, he's put on 5 pounds of muscle. Like, that felt like a warning alarm to the rest of the league.
Is that even possible?
That's exactly right.
I don't get, My theory is that he just decided to try creatine for the first time, because that'll put 5 pounds on you in 48 hours. So that's
whatever creatine he's taking is different than the creatine I'm taking. That's for sure.
No doubt, no doubt. Nick Caserio joining us on the program. Nick, D'Amico said in one of his press conferences within the last week or so that Christian Harris will be ready to go for training camp. Obviously, Christian struggled with the injuries last year. What can you tell us about where Christian is at right now?
Yeah, hopefully he'll be good to go. So, he's unfortunately had some bad luck here over the last few years. I think he's shown when he's available and he's on the field, he can be a very effective player for us. So he's done what he's able to do. I'd say we have different players throughout the course of spring in different categories. They're doing what they're capable of doing. And then the target right now is, what are we going to have? Who's going to be available for training camp? The expectation is that he'll be ready for training camp. So we'll go through these next however many weeks. There are going to be some guys that continue to train, continue to rehab, and those couple weeks there before training camp, guys will be back in the building. So we'll have them once we start training camp. Hopefully we'll have a better idea where some of these players are. But the expectation is that he'll be available and ready to go. If he's not, then we'll handle it accordingly and go from there.
You know, Sean and I talk about this quite a bit when we have these mysterious injuries like a Kyle Tucker or a Yordan Alvarez or a Christian Harris that I tend to stick up for the medical staff a little bit more than Sean, just in that it's murkier than we want to believe it is, that sometimes you just flat out don't know. With Christian Harris, it obviously ended up being murkier than you guys expected it to be. Have you been able to maybe identify the problem at least or figure some things out?
Yeah, and look, I think the point that you're making, Seth, is fair. I mean, sometimes medical people, in the end, it's not, anything that they did or didn't do. Sometimes in the end, the players, their bodies, they respond a little bit differently. So what's their training? Do they have a gap in their training? Did they miss a day? Because, again, at some point, I would just say this, the players have to be accountable as well. If something happens to a player, you got to be careful about displacing that onto somebody else. Ultimately, the players are responsible for their training, for their body, for their habits, what they do, how they approach it. If something happens or pops up, okay, then you have to figure out from a medical standpoint, what can we do and how do we do what's in the best interest of the players to get him back on the field. So, again, everybody's intentions are good. Nobody wants to, hey, if something happens, they want somebody to get hurt or misdiagnose something on purpose. So there's a lot of doctors that are out there. We got a lot of smart doctor people that help our team. And then you have other people outside of Houston and other areas who are experts in their area. So, again, our job is to try to understand what's the issue. Can we identify the situation? Can we get the information? And then what's the solution and how we're going to handle it? And then let's move forward. Let's not worry about what's happened in the past.
Nick Caserio joining us on the show. Hey, Nick, shifting gears over to the wide receiver position, it's interesting, just sort of the transformation of that position just from an age standpoint, where now you look up, Nico Collins was a young player. Now you look up with some of the turnover that's gone on in that room and the guys you brought in. He's like the unk. He's like the unk guy in that room. Yeah, exactly. I'm curious your thoughts on that sort of being Nico's room now and how equipped he is to be the example and the leader for that young group.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate. That room is a collection of a lot of good players and a lot of pros. Like even a player like Kirk, even though he's been in the league a long time, he's still a younger player. So I think they work well together. Ben McDaniels does a phenomenal job with that group. Nico's been here, what's this, year 5 or he's going into year 5 or whatever it is. And again, Nico's a good player. This isn't some mystery here. So I would say when you look at the way that Nico works and his habits and his approach, if I was in that room, I would probably watch that player as well. And Nico doesn't say a lot either. He's kind of in the Chubb category. Kirk's the same way, which is why they probably all get along. And I think our team overall, if you were asking me to define this team, like what's the spring been like, it's been about very diligent, purposeful work. Shows up, they work, they go out there, they work well with one another, they practice well together, they try to help each other. We don't really have a lot of riffraff going on. We don't have a lot of distractions. They go out there, they do their job, and honestly, that starts with D'Amico and his messaging on the front end. Here's what the expectation is. So work works, and we emphasize that because in the end, if you want to be a good football player, it's about the work. There's nothing else. There's no other magical formula that you can actually go out there and find. If you want to be good, you have to work. So what does that look like? You show up. Your feet are on the ground, all right? You're focused on the job at hand. What are we trying to accomplish today? All right, we're going to practice from 9:45 to 11, and then once we're done practicing, we're going to go to the weight room, and we're going to train, and we'll work on our recovery, and we're going to get stronger. So, if you do that, at least you have a shot to be a good football player and to give yourself an opportunity to compete on this team. But that receiver room, we feel like there's a number of good players in there, young and old, if you want to call it. Nico's a little bit older, but overall it's a pretty young room. Even Justin Watson's been in the league here a little bit, but he's still a younger player. So it'll be interesting to watch that competition, and, we'll keep as many as we feel that is necessary. I'd say the Iowa State kids have come in here and done a really good job as well. And, just anecdotally, talk about work. We practice, and then Jalen, has kind of missed a few practices here, but a weight room is right outside of D'Amico in my office, and one day we kind of look around and you hear a bunch of noise, and you got the jugs machine set up in the weight room, helmets catching balls off the jugs basically after their meetings or after practice, and just because they're trying to work on their craft and get better. So we didn't have to tell them anything. They're doing that on their own. I mean, so I'd say that's a good place to start. And those are the things that you have to do in order to be a successful football player.
Has it been, I guess, fun or interesting for you with Nick Caserio in that you both started off at the same place and you go to different places and you're gonna learn different ways of doing things, etc. Has it been fun kind of comparing notes with him in that regard?
Yeah, I try to leave Nick alone, so I think everybody's probably sick of being around me. But, Nick's done a good job, I think, of just trying to be himself and put his imprint on the offense and try to figure out, like, what's the offense look like for the Houston Texans. I think Nick's background, and we've talked about this on the show when he got hired, he has experience in multiple systems. So you have to figure out what elements of each system do you think you want to utilize, what do you want that to look like, and in the end, it's about what the players can handle. So you can have whatever system, you can try to put something in, whatever you think is going to work as a coach, but if the players can't absorb it and understand it and then go out there and apply it, then it doesn't really matter. So I think Nick has a good amount of humility where he doesn't act like he has all the answers. He's going to try to figure out what's best for the players and maybe pull some things from some different experiences, but I think Nick's worked really hard. He's got a good attitude, and it's really, from his perspective, it's just been about putting the foundation in place, and most of the offense is in. And then once training camp starts, we'll go back and kind of reintroduce it. But, in a pretty good spot. And Nick's come in here and just been himself, which is all you can ask for a coach.
So he's obviously a high-energy guy, and very intense, but in a seemingly in a positive type of way.
Yep.
What was he like as a young guy in New England? Was he one of these guys you had to calm down, whippersnapper too?
I think when we're all younger coaches, you have a lot of energy. You just want to make sure that you're displacing the energy the right way. But I'd say the way that he coaches the offense is very similar to the way that he coached the tight ends in New England. He's got a lot of energy. Nick's a very positive kid, but it's genuine. It's not a lot of fake positivity. We've all been around people who have that fake positivity, and you can smell it a mile away. Yeah. But Nick's not about that. Nick's about just communication. He's about energy, and I'd say that's really emblematic of our team. When you look at our coaches, they coach, they teach, they communicate effectively. There's a lot of juice. It starts with D'Amico, nobody has more than him, and then that trickles down to when you look at Matt Burke. We could probably have a 12-hour discussion about Frank Ross and just his level of energy and his juice, and then Nick Caserio. So, again, whatever you are as a coach, your job, just be who you are. Don't try to be something that you're not because you feel like you got to force feed. And I think that's the one thing with our building with people. Come in here and be yourself. So whatever you think is going to work, you go ahead and do it. If there's something that we have to get fixed or correct or have to dial it down in some area, we'll have a discussion about it, and then we'll keep moving forward. But I would say a lot of what you're seeing from Nick, just overseeing the offense, is similar to what we saw in New England in our time together.
Okay, so over on the defensive side, how's it been with C.J. Gardner-Johnson so far? Because that feels like we're throwing a stick of dynamite right now.
No, he's been good. Yeah, he's been good. He was here kind of for the early part of OTAs, and then he kind of was doing some work on his own, and then he was here the past couple of days for minicamp. So honestly, he's been good to work with. So we haven't heard him that much. So maybe they'll come out in training camp, but he's blended in. He's blended in well. Looking forward to working with him a little bit more and, getting him ready to go for training camp. Okay,
Sean and I have a pet theory about some of the contracts that you've been doing lately. Tell us if we're completely off base or not. Theories. Yeah, we're going to do a conspiracy theory YouTube
conspiracy
video.
radio here at 610?
Yeah, maybe. We're heading into the slow time, Nick. It may turn into that.
This is where, we were just curious because we were kind of thinking about, I was telling Sean that, I've always felt that a lot of times players are too fixated on being the highest paid player in terms of average per year or the total money on the contract, where I've always felt like players should be more focused on, guaranteed money, short-term contracts, prove it, and then you don't have any drama. And a lot of the contracts that you've given out in the last few years have been short-term, lots of guaranteed money. Danielle Hunter is probably the ultimate example of that. And I felt like, it seems like the guys that maybe really get it and aren't too wrapped up in their ego and everything understand the value of a shorter term deal with lots of guaranteed money. Financially, it makes a lot of sense. Is there any kind of correlation that you've seen between that maybe the guys that are just a little more dialed in on the things that matter aren't always necessarily as concerned about having the highest average per year or the largest total contract?
Every player's different, and I don't want to speak for players, but I would say this. certain players prioritize some things over others. And part of our job, part of my role is understanding what's important to the player. It doesn't mean that you get mad at a player because he prioritizes something that maybe you would prioritize. You can't really worry about that. So anytime you enter a negotiation, you try to have an idea and understanding what's important to the player. Okay, what are we comfortable from a length standpoint? Does this make sense? And when you look at the contracts that we've done, we're all over the map, right? We've done 1-year deals, we've done 2-year deals, we've done 3-year extensions, we've done 4-year deals, whatever the case may be. In the end, part of my job and responsibility is to have the give and take with the agent. I think and I'm not trying to be derogatory here, but ultimately it's the player's decision and choice about what they think is important. Because ultimately, it's your career, and you got to make the decision that you feel is best for yourself. Now, can you get counsel and direction from some folks? And maybe their intentions potentially could be different than whatever your intentions are. So our job in the end is to say, look, this is what we feel is fair. Are you comfortable with it or not? Any negotiation, it's not about, quote-unquote, winning a negotiation. We've never gone into any negotiation that way. Honestly, we don't believe in that. I don't believe in that personally because it's not a good way to run, I would say, an organization. There's going to be some give and take. In the end, you want everybody to be comfortable and, feel that they're being compensated appropriately. And if the team's comfortable and the player's comfortable, then it's good for everybody involved, and then the player can internalize it and process it however they see fit. So, but in the end, look, let's not put our head in the sand here. I mean, money's a part of our game, and players want to be well compensated, as they should. I mean, the big thing is go out there and play good football, and you'll probably, be compensated accordingly. So, and then you're going to get whatever you earn. So we're pretty open-minded, we're pretty flexible, and we try to maintain good discourse and dialogue with agents along the way, and try to do what we feel is in the best interest of not only the player, but the club ultimately as well.
All right, Nick, we know we got to get you up and out of here. I'm asking this on behalf of Seth. What books are you bringing to the Cape to read when you're taking some time off?
Great question. So I'm actually going to bring it's a book of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Essentially, it's got all the shareholder meetings and insights. It's a pretty thick book, so I thought to myself, this will probably be appropriate for summer. And, I'll probably finish off a few of the books. I mean, not to go nerd on y'all, but, I've tried to, over the last, since the beginning of the year, I have a list that I'm keeping. I'm on, every 1 or 2 weeks, finishing one off. So I'm just trying to keep it moving there a little bit. I read a book about Bitcoin, trying to learn about that a little bit.
Ooh.
I was reading this. I just read
see if you can find out how I can find my lost passcode from the one my Bitcoin passcode is on a Post-it note in a landfill somewhere, but it's out there.
I don't own any Bitcoin yet, so I'm Coinbase, so my broker doesn't allow me to buy Bitcoin yet. But no, I'd say finance to behavioral science. I just finished off. It's called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, and it's about essentially how we sometimes probably lie to ourselves. More than just behavior science and personal behavior. So kind of thought-provoking, but yeah. I'm sure I'll have my head in a book somewhere and just try to get a little bit smarter. I need a lot of help, so I'll see if I can learn anything.
I've read three of the books you recommended from last year, and I know I'm going to do a 3-hour-long podcast episode with you whenever you.
I might actually listen to that then.
Yeah. No, he wants you on it. Nick.
I want you on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I got Morgan Housel seeping out my ears right now. Yeah.
Huge Morgan Housel fan. Love Morgan Housel.
All right, we got to get Nick out. So I mean, I'm being presumptuous when I say the Cape. You're not bringing the family to Saudi Arabia at the end of June for Cena versus Punk? Take the girls to Ridao in Saudi Arabia.
Is Jericho going to make an appearance? It's and if Tony will let him out of his contract, maybe he'll show up.
Jericho shows up with the list. That would be tremendous.
So Cena, Punk in Saudi Arabia. Huh?
Yeah.
What do the fans think about the Cena heel turn? How's that going? I haven't really paid too much attention.
He's embracing it, and so the fans are very much embracing, telling him how much he sucks. Okay. So it's going just fine as far as WWE is concerned.
Great.
All right, awesome. Nick. We know we got to get you up and out of here. Have a great summer. We will be talking to you at training camp, and we are all, I think I speak for the audience, we are all very much looking forward to this season of Texans football.
Thanks, fellas. Always appreciate the time. Enjoy the summer.
You too. Thanks. Appreciate you. That's Texans Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio.